Welcome to the second installment of the Swisha Loop Chronicles. On our last episode, we ventured out past the GTA on our way to Quebec with a lunch stop at Lock 21 in Peterborough. We spent the night on an abandoned airfield off of Highway 41 before eventually gassing up in the rain in Pembroke. We made our way onto the loop, encountered some mild obstacles, and eventually broke for camp at an unknown location and prepared for some delicious fish tacos for dinner. After a couple of cold ones and a peaceful night's sleep, we set back off on the Swisha Loop. Our second day on the loop started off like the first. With some overnight showers, some of the low-lying areas were expectedly mucky and wet. Some sections, however, showed signs of previously more extreme water erosion, like this channel cut into the left side track here. It may not look like it on film, but I got the Bad Mule pretty tippy keeping it to the right to avoid putting a wheel into that. Not long after, we happened upon a section marked on the map as a washout. Again, on video it doesn't look too bad, but I was super wary of all the debris across it. And being mostly a mud base, I decided after scanning the map, it's an easy and quick bypass. Turns out that bypass kind of worked in our favor. The road took us along this beautiful lake, and so far on our venture, access to large bodies of water have been slim to none. So after happening upon this boat launch, we decided it was a good opportunity to grab some water for filtering and get our feet wet. What we came to realize later, that this lake had dozens of cottages on it, and maybe it was just a coincidence, but after filtering the lake water, it definitely had a delicious, dish soapy grey water and premixed taste to it. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I see Lexi approaching the water now, I'm pretty sure this was her very first time being exposed to something like a lake. We were now definitely on some better maintained and higher trafficked roads. But if there's one thing I can say about the Swisha Loop now, is that it was definitely curated to get you off those main dirt roads and into the scrub. But following the loop on Gaia turned out to be a bit challenging. Zoomed out, you can easily make out your heading and route, but when it came to zooming in for directional changes, you could see the route in some instances doesn't properly follow the trail. This caused some frequent wrong turns and subsequent turnarounds, something I really wanted to avoid because of the tight fuel range. For instance, this intersection here, I wrongfully assumed the route went right on the nice wide smooth road, and on Gaia GPS, the direction wasn't obvious until I ventured far enough off the road that I could see my map icon arrow going the wrong way. And as soon as I came across the next washout crossing, I knew I had to be going the right way. At one time, this used to be a bridge crossing, but no longer. Onto some grassy 2-track, and I disconnect the sway bar again, just for a steadier ride. It's definitely less traveled down here, and still mucky and wet in a lot of the areas. A lot of times the loop will take you off and cut between main roads, and you eventually end up back on some nice wide forestry roads for short stints. If one were interested in a less arduous trip, you could easily navigate these better maintained roads, but then you'd be missing out on half the fun. A few times I came across some crews out here working on the infrastructure, keeping the main routes passable. I used an alternate audio track here because as soon as Lexi saw somebody, she'd just absolutely lose it. It seems like a few days alone in the woods, and every person she sees is someone that is a potential threat. Not too long after that, we were back off the main road and into a series of challenges, the first of which this washed-out downhill section. After getting out to have a better look, I decided the best line was to try to keep right of the ditch, then cut back to straddle it, and the Bronco's onboard cameras come in real handy here. Again, on camera, the descent and the misperception of size and depth of the trench is misleading. Dropping a wheel in there would have been serious trouble. This next part was super fun, but slow going. I was really paying attention to the wheel placement, my biggest concern being slicing open a tire sidewall on a sharp half-buried rock. Most of the rocks here were loose and just bowling ball size, nothing like the boulders you see on the trails out in California or Moab. But still, being solo in the middle of nowhere, you pay attention to what you're driving over. When it comes to a skewed camera perspective, this little gully takes the cake. I'm taking it in 4 low. The drop in and departure are both nearly 45 degrees, making for a very tight pinch at the bottom. The stubby 2-door Bronco makes easy work of it, but a full-size long wheelbase pickup would no doubt drag its ass through here. This water crossing no doubt has been around for a long time, and it's pretty evident of the patchwork repairs, but it turns out to be a very structurally sound bridge. This particular section of the loop I wasn't very fond of. Super tight and overgrown with brush, it made for some not very reassuring scrapes and scratch sounds the entire way. With my small branch saw stowed away in the rooftop box, I resorted to just pushing some of the more offending looking branches out of the road. Once clear of the pinstripe factory, it was on to some more major logging roads and the perfect time to look for a spot for the night. I turned off near a gravel pit and eventually came to this small siding to set up, as good a place as any. The first order of business was getting some lake water filtered, as we were getting quite low on potable water. Also, using one of my 2 identical Rotopax cans for lake water, I definitely don't want to make the mistake of mixing them up. A nice cold beer on this sweltering hot afternoon, a quick chili dog dinner, and the brutally annoying deer flies to keep us company. I decided I could maybe put something together for Lexi with my fly screen netting, who was obviously being hounded by the flies pretty bad. And this is what the initial setup looked like. She seemed pretty content in there, albeit a little smothered.
What are you doing? Are you good? Your tail's wagging. Keep up nice. I know it's hot out here, boys. It's hot out here.
I grabbed some unused tent fly poles and wedged them into the chair fabric to create a kind of structure to help lift off the netting and give Lexi a little more space.
See? What's the matter? Come here.
She seemed pretty content to spend the rest of the day in there while we waited for the night to come. The following morning we woke to another hot and humid day after getting a good shower soaking last night. A quick bagel and coffee breakfast, and it was time to pack up and head down the road over the border to Rapides Des Joachims to gas up at the local Esso. Super friendly staff there, and they all just fell in love with Lexi. A still respectable 11.5 liters per 100k overall average, and 16.3 liters since our fuel top-up in Pembroke. Heading back into the loop, we stopped at the Zec-Duamin registration office to pay the $12 entrance fee. As it turns out, when you register, you let them know how long you plan on staying. But what I didn't know is that you have to drop off your registration form when you exit the Zec, so they know that you're no longer in the area in case of wildfires or emergencies. While thus far I've been running 30 psi in the tires, I decided with the respectable mileage we've been getting in the Bronco, I can afford to run the tires a little lower, and it makes a noticeable difference in the ride. Well worth the extra gas. On some of the main roads, we're able to make time and travel at a speed where the truck actually has decent fuel economy, not crawling around at 10 kilometers an hour over rough terrain. Heading up to the northern reaches of the loop, we come across this beautiful sand lot right next to a scenic lake. One of the Swisha Loop Facebook page members asked about areas to camp that could accommodate 6 or more vehicles. If you're watching this video, definitely mark this one on your map. I kinda wish we would have traveled further yesterday and spent last night here instead of the gravel pit. I probably would have spent a couple of nights here at least. Just beautiful. I decided to dump the dirty dishwater that I grabbed at the last lake and refill my rotopacks with some of this lake water, which was noticeably cleaner. Back on the road and making good time again, but it's always worth the while to stop and take in the scenery whenever possible. A little ways up the road and we come across another airstrip in the middle of nowhere. It looks as if someone purposely barricaded the path into it, so maybe this one isn't abandoned. We also saw evidence of a recent burn here. It doesn't look too extensive, just the low-lying brush. A section on the map that I marked previously while doing trip research was a little area that looked like water rapids from the satellite imagery. And it so happens there was a trail leading into the way. What I failed to notice on the map, however, were the elevation lines. I'm just glad I didn't traverse my way into here in the dark. It would have made for a great camp spot on the opposite side of the river though. A word of caution, be wary of the roadway if you're traveling large sections of it at speed. More than once I had to jump on the brakes for these little sinkholes crossing the lane. It might have been okay if I crossed at high speed, but at moderate speed, it would have been a massive hit and potentially damaging. And from what I expected from the loop, it wasn't long before we were off the main roads and into the rough stuff again. One thing I didn't realize while spending this amount of time off-roading is how stiff and sore my neck and shoulders became, craning up over the hood, watching where you were going. This section of road led us across one of the better water crossings on the Swisha. Not terribly deep, but nice and wide and a firm bottom. Child's play. And another section of tight bush again. A section I could have done without if I'm honest. It eventually led us to a shallow filled-in crossing which was obviously sturdy enough, and with a short span, it was easily navigated. Further along it got a little wetter with narrow and flooded sections for some distance. If I had to turn around along here, it would have been pretty difficult. This part of the loop, if I remember correctly, is the Beaver Dam area marked on the map. It's pretty wild seeing how high the water is just beside the trail at spots, with only some dirt and sticks keeping it back. With the shadows getting longer, we started scoping for a spot for the night. While not quite a lakefront beach area, we found this clearing that would do just fine. Because of the heat and mostly because of the flies, we've been traveling mostly with the windows up and the AC on, keeping a close eye on fuel consumption. I took inventory of the brush and damage to the truck on those tight spots, but it seemed we fared pretty well. I quit dusting off of the solar panel and already the heat was getting to me. I swear the humidity had to be close to 100% as well. Just no relief, even in the late afternoon. Well, almost no relief. The poor dog, trying to stay out of the sun inside the truck, must have been feeling pretty miserable, but I tried to keep her as comfortable as I could.
Puppies. Lexi, come here. Come here, lay down. Fan, honey. It's a fan, honey. Yeah.
But we had to take turns in front of the fan. It turned out the rest of the week we'd be suffering with this heat and humidity, seemingly with no break, apart from the occasional rain shower. We didn't stop for lunch break this time, and I was eager to get dinner going. And for tonight, an easy meal I love and one that I haven't had in forever, the Philly cheesesteak. The real key to a good Philly is slicing your steak as thin as you can. Traditionalists will tell you the only other ingredient to the sandwich is onion, but I've always favored red pepper with mine as well. Others go so far as to add mushrooms, or God forbid, even lettuce to their Philly. Please stop doing that. The reason for the thinly sliced meat is to get a nice crispness to the steak. If you've ever had a smash burger before, it's kind of the same idea. A dash of salt and pepper, lots of heat, and cooking the veg just long enough to keep some crunch to it. Some would argue on the type of cheese that traditionally belongs on a Philly, but marbled cheddar is what I had on hand. Provolone or Swisha, Swiss, is just as good, however. With the sun finally heading towards the horizon, it was dinner time at last with my special girl. And a close to another beautiful day in Quebec.